The stone walls remember everything. They remember the night Duke Nathaniel Ravenshire first crossed the threshold of the abandoned abbey with mud on his boots and desperation in his eyes. They remember the woman who waited for him in shadows deeper than sin itself. And tonight, 7 years after their first forbidden touch, those same walls will witness the moment when silence becomes a weapon sharper than any blade the crown ever forged. You think you know how power falls? You think scandal is just whispered gossip in gilded halls? Stay with me. Watch closely. Because what happens in the next hour inside this forgotten monastery will crack open the rot festering at the heart of England's nobility. And when it does, you'll understand that the most dangerous secrets aren't the ones we keep. They're the ones someone else has been keeping for us. Bulk. The rain came down like nails against the abbey's broken roof. Nathaniel Ravenshire stood in the courtyard with water streaming down his face, his merchant's cloak soaked through to worthlessness. The disguise had worked for 7 years. Common wool, bent posture, eyes down. Nobody looked twice at a pilgrim traveling dark roads in winter. Nobody except the woman waiting inside. He pushed through the warped wooden door into the nave. Candlelight flickered against stone columns carved by hands dead 500 years. The place smelled of rot and old incense. Somewhere above, wind screamed through gaps in the ceiling where time had stolen the slate. Vivian stood beside the altar. She didn't turn when he entered, just stood there in a dark traveling cloak, hood thrown back, staring at the cracked fresco of some saint whose face had been worn away by centuries of damp. Her hair caught the candlelight, copper and gold, the same hair he'd tangled his fingers in 1,000 times while the world outside believed her faithful to a husband she despised. Nathaniel crossed the nave without speaking. His boots echoed. Water dripped from his cloak onto stones worn smooth by centuries of penitent knees. When he reached her, she turned. The first thing he always noticed was her eyes, gray like winter sky before snow. The second thing was the tension in her jaw. The third was the way her hands were trembling. Something was wrong. You want to see him whole? Nathaniel Ravenshire at 43. 6 feet of lean muscle and aristocratic bone structure. Face carved hard by politics and private wars. Dark hair going silver at the temples. Hands that signed execution orders and stroked her skin with equal precision. A man who'd learned young that power wasn't inherited. It was seized and held with teeth bared. He'd killed his first rival at 26. Poisoned the second at 30. By 35, he'd consolidated enough influence to sit 3 seats from the king himself. And he'd done it all with the same cold calculation that brought him here month after month to this ruin in Blackwood Forest. Vivian reached for him. Her fingers found his chest. Not gentle, urgent, like she was checking he was real. "You really came," she said. He caught her wrist. "Why wouldn't I?" Her laugh came out sharp, bitter. "Because half of London thinks you've gone mad. Because my husband has spies watching the northern roads. Because anyone with sense would have run the moment the whispers started." "What whispers?" She pulled away, walked to the nearest column and pressed her palm against stone worn smooth by 5 centuries of weather. The candles made shadows dance across her face, made her look 10 years older than 32. "They're saying things about you, about us. Nothing concrete, nothing provable, but enough that dinner conversations stop when I enter rooms, enough that your allies are asking quiet questions about your loyalties." Nathaniel's jaw tightened. "Who? Does it matter?" She turned back to face him. "It's starting, Nathaniel, the thing we always knew would come. The walls are closing." He moved to her, caught her face between his hands, forced her to meet his eyes. "Listen to me. Nobody knows about this place. Nobody. 7 years, Vivian. 7 years, and not one soul has followed me here. You don't know that." "I would know." He said it with absolute certainty, with the same cold confidence that had built his fortune. "I would feel it. The way I feel everything that threatens what's mine." "And what am I?" Her voice dropped low. "Your property? Your secret? Your mine." The word came out rough. Final. In every way that matters. Mine. She stared at him. Rain hammered the roof. Wind shrieked through broken stone. And in that moment, in the ruin of a place abandoned by God and crown alike, Lady Vivian Ashcroft closed her eyes and let herself believe him. He kissed her like a man drowning. She kissed back like the water pulling him under. 7 years. It had been 7 years since the night he'd first seen her across a ballroom thick with cigar smoke and political scheming. She'd been wearing emerald silk, standing beside her husband, Richard Ashcroft, with the frozen smile of a woman performing a role she'd stopped believing in. Their eyes met. Something ignited. Something neither of them had words for then or now. 3 months later, he'd engineered their first private conversation at a garden party. 6 months after that, he'd arranged circumstances that left them alone in a library while rain pounded the windows. And when she'd finally spoken the truth, that her marriage was a cage built from her family's debts and Richard's ambition, Nathaniel had understood with perfect clarity that he would burn the world down before letting her remain trapped. The Abbey became their sanctuary, their sin, their salvation. Here, between stone walls that remembered prayers older than England itself, they could shed the masks they wore for court and crown. Here, Nathaniel wasn't the duke who'd clawed his way up from a minor title through ruthless calculation. Vivian wasn't the advisor's wife, performing grace and obedience. They were just two people who'd found in each other the only honest thing in a world built on lies. Nathaniel pulled back, rested his forehead against hers, breathing hard. "I won't let them take this," he said quietly. "I won't let them take you. You can't stop it." Her voice cracked. "You can't control everything, Nathaniel. Not this. Watch me." She laughed. Actually laughed. A sound with no humor in it at all. "God, you really believe that? You actually think you can just—" A sound cut her off. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Coming from the shadows at the far end of the nave where the monks' cells had once stood. Nathaniel's hand went to the knife at his belt. He stepped in front of Vivian, scanned the darkness beyond the candlelight, every muscle coiled tight. The footsteps continued, unhurried, accompanied by the soft tap of a walking stick against stone. Then a voice, old, steady, carrying the particular authority of men who've spent lifetimes watching without being seen. "Peace, your grace. I mean no harm." A figure emerged from the shadows. Brother Elias. The man was ancient, 80 if he was a day, bent spine, liver-spotted hands gripping a gnarled staff, monk's robes gone gray with age and weather. But his eyes were sharp as broken glass. Nathaniel's hand stayed on the knife. "Who the hell are you?" The old monk smiled, gentle, sad. "Someone who has kept your secret far longer than you know." The words hit like cold water. Vivian made a small sound behind him, something between gasp and sob. Nathaniel's mind raced, calculating, measuring threats. "How long have you been here?" Brother Elias moved slowly to the nearest pew, lowered himself onto wood warped by centuries of damp, set his staff across his knees. "How long have I been in this abbey?" 73 years. "How long have I known about your visits?" "Since the very first night you came." "Impossible." Nathaniel's voice went flat. Cold. "This place has been abandoned for decades, abandoned by the church, not by those who remember what it was." The old man's gaze moved to Vivian. "Lady Ashcroft, your grandmother's grandmother took her vows in this very building. Did you know that? Before it fell to ruin, before the crown seized the lands, this abbey belonged to your bloodline." Vivian stepped forward. Her face had gone white. "That's not possible. My family has no connection to—" "Your family has many connections that powerful men have worked hard to erase." Brother Elias leaned on his staff. "And I have spent my life preserving what they tried to destroy." Nathaniel's hand tightened on the knife. "Get to the point, old man. Why reveal yourself now?" "Because silence, your grace, has a price. And after 7 years of watching you risk everything for stolen hours with a married woman, I believe the time has come to discuss payment." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Vivian's voice came out barely above a whisper. "You're blackmailing us." Brother Elias shook his head slowly. "I am offering you a choice. Continue down your current path and watch your affair destroy everything you've built, or help me expose the corruption rotting the kingdom from within." Nathaniel laughed, a sound with razors in it. "You think I give a damn about corruption? I am the corruption, you delusional fool." "Are you?" The old monk's eyes locked on his. Or are you simply a man who learned to swim in poisoned waters? Tell me, Duke Ravenshire, the men who sit beside you at council, the advisors who whisper in the king's ear, the judges who sell verdicts to the highest bidder, do you truly believe their sins less damning than your own? What I believe is irrelevant. Nathaniel took a step forward. What matters is power. And you have none, don't I? Brother Elias reached into his robes, pulled out a leather folder worn soft with age. I have documents, letters, ledgers, evidence of crimes that would see half the peerage hanged, all preserved here, in this forgotten place, waiting for the moment when truth could no longer be buried. He opened the folder. Even from across the nave, Nathaniel could see the official seals, the signatures, including, Brother Elias continued quietly, proof that Richard Ashcroft murdered 3 members of his own family to secure his inheritance and position, that the royal advisor you all trust with the kingdom's secrets is a man who drowned his younger brother in a bath, who pushed his elderly uncle downstairs, who poisoned his own mother with arsenic disguised as medicine. Vivian's legs buckled. Nathaniel caught her, held her upright while she shook. You're lying, Nathaniel said, but his voice had lost its certainty. Brother Elias closed the folder, set it on the pew beside him. I watched him do it. The youngest brother. Here, in this very abbey. 23 years ago, when Richard Ashcroft was still just an ambitious young man with too many relatives standing between him and a title. He thought the place was truly abandoned. He didn't see the old monk in the shadows. Vivian made a sound like something dying. Why? Nathaniel's voice came out rough. Why keep it secret all these years? Because I was a coward. The old man's face twisted with something like grief. Because I told myself that one man's crimes weren't worth the chaos of exposure, that stability mattered more than justice. But I was wrong, and now London is governed by murderers and thieves while good men rot in prisons for stealing bread. So you want me to what? Nathaniel's laugh was ugly. Confess to the king? Destroy the court? Tear down the system that keeps the kingdom from eating itself? I want you to choose truth. Brother Elias stood, staff in hand, old body straightening with sudden strength. You've already risked everything for love, Your Grace. Risk it once more for something greater than your own desire. The candles guttered. Rain pounded harder. And in that moment, Nathaniel Ravenshire understood with perfect clarity that the game had changed, that the secret he'd protected for 7 years was no longer his greatest vulnerability. Because the old monk was right. The men surrounding the throne were monsters, and Nathaniel had spent 2 decades enabling them because it served his interests, because power demanded compromise, because the alternative was irrelevance. But now he stood in an abandoned abbey, holding the woman he'd destroyed his conscience for, while an ancient monk offered him something more dangerous than any scandal. Purpose. Redemption. A reason beyond survival. He looked at Vivian. Her face was wet. Not from rain, from tears she didn't bother hiding. What do you want to do? He asked quietly. She met his eyes. Hers were full of broken things. I want to burn it all down. Every lie, every secret, everything that made me something to be traded and used. I want the truth, even if it destroys us. Nathaniel turned back to Brother Elias. The old man waited, patient as stone. How long, Nathaniel asked, do we have? Before someone else discovers your affair? Days, perhaps hours. The rumor mill has already started grinding. It's only a matter of time before someone connects the scattered pieces. And if I help you, if I expose Richard and the others, what then? Then you lose your title, your influence, possibly your life. Brother Elias said it without flinching. But you save your soul, and perhaps give this kingdom a chance at something better than the rot it's drowning in. Nathaniel looked at the folder on the pew, at the evidence of crimes he'd suspected but never proven, at the weight of truth he'd spent his life avoiding. He thought of the men he'd dined with, laughed with, plotted with, men who wore nobility like masks while they raped the kingdom for profit. He thought of his own hands, the blood on them, the compromises, the slow death of whatever idealism he'd carried as a younger man. And he thought of Vivian, of 7 years of stolen moments, of the only honest thing he'd ever built. A sound shattered the moment. Horses. Many horses. Thunder of hooves against mud, shouting voices, the crash of armed men dismounting in the courtyard outside. Brother Elias closed his eyes. They found you. Vivian grabbed Nathaniel's arm, her nails dug into his skin. The letters! Someone stole our letters! The door exploded inward. Soldiers poured through. Royal Guard, 20 armed men in rain-soaked armor, swords drawn, eyes hard, and behind them, stepping through with the careful precision of a man who'd planned this moment for months, Richard Ashcroft. Vivian's husband looked exactly like what he was. Handsome, mid-50s, silver at the temples, face arranged in an expression of righteous fury that would have been convincing if Nathaniel hadn't known what Brother Elias had just revealed. A murderer, a monster, playing victim while soldiers surrounded the only two people who threatened his carefully constructed lies. Richard's eyes found his wife, found Nathaniel, and the smile that crossed his face was the coldest thing in that ruined abbey. "Well," the royal advisor said quietly, "isn't this cozy?" The soldiers closed ranks. Steel gleamed in candlelight, and Nathaniel Ravenshire realized with sudden, terrible clarity that the choice Brother Elias had offered was already gone. Because sometimes fate doesn't wait for decisions. Sometimes it just kicks the door down and starts counting bodies. Richard stepped closer. Rain dripped from his cloak onto ancient stones. His voice came out soft, dangerous, controlled. 7 years, Vivian. 7 years you've been whoring yourself to this. Nathaniel moved. Fast. Brutal. The way he'd learned in back alleys before titles and power taught him to delegate violence. His fist caught Richard's jaw. Bone on bone. The crack echoed through the nave. The advisor went down hard, blood on his lips. The soldiers surged forward. Nathaniel spun, grabbed the nearest one's sword arm, twisted, broke the wrist with a sound like green wood snapping, took the falling blade, drove it up under the man's chin. First blood, first body. The others hesitated. 1 second. That's all Nathaniel needed. He turned to Vivian, to the woman he'd chosen over everything, locked eyes with her one last time. "Run," he said. She didn't move, just stood there with tears streaming down her face and something like wonder in her eyes, because she'd never seen this version of him, the man before the title, before the masks, the savage thing he'd buried under silken strategy. "I said, run!" Brother Elias moved between them, staff raised, old body suddenly solid as the stones around them. "No more running," he said. His voice carried through the abbey like prophecy. "No more secrets. Let them see what they've created. Let them witness what their corruption has birthed." Richard Ashcroft dragged himself upright, wiped blood from his mouth. His smile was gone. What remained was pure hatred. "Seize them," he ordered. "All three. Treason. Adultery. Murder of a royal guard. I want them in chains before dawn." The soldiers advanced. Nathaniel raised the stolen sword. Calculated odds. 20 against 1, Vivian unarmed. An old monk who could barely stand. Impossible numbers. But he'd beaten impossible before. And then Brother Elias did something Nathaniel would remember until the day he died. The old monk reached into his robes, pulled out the leather folder, held it up so every soldier could see the royal seals, the official stamps, the weight of evidence that could shatter kingdoms. "Before you take another step," Brother Elias said clearly, "know this. I hold proof that Richard Ashcroft is a murderer 3 times over, that he drowned his own brother in this very building, that the man giving you orders has built his fortune on family blood." The soldiers froze. Richard's face went white. "That's lies. Slander from a—" "There are witnesses listed in these documents," Brother Elias continued. "Servants who saw, physicians who were paid to falsify death certificates, ledgers showing payments made to silence those who asked questions, all preserved, all documented, all ready to be delivered to the king himself." Silence, rain, wind, the crackle of dying candles. Richard's voice came out strangled. "Kill him! Kill them all! Now!" A soldier stepped forward, not toward Nathaniel, toward Richard. The advisor backed up, bumped into stone. "Nowhere to go." "We want to see the documents," the soldier said. His voice was young, uncertain, but determined. "If there's truth in them—" There's no truth, Richard snarled. Just lies from a broken old man and a duke who's been fucking another man's wife for... I drowned my younger brother here. Nathaniel's voice cut through the abbey like a blade through silk. In a stone basin near the eastern cells. I was 24, he was 19, and I held his head under water until he stopped struggling. Every eye turned to Richard Ashcroft. The advisor's mouth opened, closed, opened again. That's not... Brother Elias opened the folder, began reading names, dates, details, each word another nail in the coffin of Richard's carefully built lies. And Nathaniel Ravenshire, Duke of Ravenshire, man who'd spent 20 years building power through compromise and calculation, made a choice that would cost him everything. He lowered the sword, looked at the soldiers, at Richard, at the witnesses to crimes that went far beyond his own, and started talking. He told them about the corruption, the bribes, the judges bought and sold, the policies written to serve the few while the many starved. He named names, detailed crimes, exposed the rot festering at the heart of the kingdom with the same precision he'd once used to navigate it. Vivian watched him destroy himself, watched her forbidden lover burn his entire world down for something approaching truth, and she understood finally why she'd loved him. Not for his power, not for his title, not even for the passion that had driven them together month after month in this forgotten place, but for this moment, this choice, this willingness to sacrifice everything when the alternative was watching evil wear the mask of righteousness unchallenged. Richard Ashcroft started screaming, ordering arrests, demanding silence, but the soldiers weren't listening anymore. They were looking at Brother Elias's documents, at proof of murders that made Nathaniel's affair look like a child's transgression, at evidence that the king's most trusted advisor was exactly the kind of monster the realm should fear most, the one who smiled while holding the knife. When the soldiers finally moved, it wasn't to arrest Nathaniel. They surrounded Richard Ashcroft. The royal advisor fought, screamed, threatened, promised gold, position, whatever they wanted. But some things can't be bought back. Some masks, once removed, can never be worn again. Dawn broke over Blackwood Forest while they bound Richard in chains meant for Nathaniel, while Brother Elias gathered his documents to present before the king himself. While soldiers who'd come to arrest a duke for adultery instead found themselves witnesses to something far more dangerous than forbidden love. They found themselves face to face with the truth. And the truth, as it turned out, was exactly as destructive as everyone had always feared. Vivian stood beside Nathaniel in the ruins of their sanctuary. Their hands found each other, fingers intertwined. Neither spoke, because there was nothing left to say. They'd survived the night. But the dawn promised consequences neither could imagine. The scandal that would break, the trials, the judgments, the fall of powerful men and the chaos that would follow. But also, maybe, a chance at something honest, something real, something worth the cost. Outside, horses stamped, men shouted. The machinery of justice began its slow, grinding work. And inside the abbey, Nathaniel Ravenshire bent his head to Vivian's, whispered 4 words against her temple. Worth it. All of it. She closed her eyes. Believed him. But neither of them saw the figure watching from the forest edge. The man in traveling clothes with royal insignia hidden beneath his cloak. The messenger who'd witnessed everything. Who would carry word back to London before sunset. Who would set in motion forces far darker and more dangerous than either Richard Ashcroft or Brother Elias had imagined. Because the corruption they'd exposed tonight, it went deeper than 3 murders and some bought judges. It reached into the throne room itself. And the men who held real power, the ones who made Richard Ashcroft look like an amateur, they didn't take exposure well. They took revenge. The messenger's name was Thomas Crow. He rode hard through Blackwood Forest while dawn light bled through the trees like something wounded. His horse's breath came in white clouds. The animal was near collapse, but Crow didn't slow. Couldn't slow. Not with what he'd witnessed, not with what he had to report. He reached London by midday, bypassed the palace entirely, went straight to a townhouse in Mayfair that didn't appear on any official registry, the kind of place where decisions got made before kings ever heard about problems. The door opened before he knocked. Inside, 3 men waited in a room thick with cigar smoke and morning whiskey. Lord Chancellor Pemberton, Trade Minister Blackwell, and the one who mattered most, Sir Edmund Corvis, the king's private secretary, the man who actually ran England while the crown played at ceremonies. Crow delivered his report standing. No chair offered, no comfort extended. When he finished, the silence stretched long enough to hurt. Pemberton broke it first. His voice came out measured, controlled, dangerous. How many soldiers witnessed the exchange? 20. Crow swallowed, plus the monk, the Duke, Lady Ashcroft, and Richard, currently being transported to the Tower. The guards believe they're doing their duty, protecting the crown from a murderer. Blackwell laughed. Sharp, ugly, fools. They have no idea what they've done. Sir Edmund hadn't moved, hadn't spoken, just sat behind his desk with fingers steepled, eyes fixed on something invisible, his mind already 3 moves ahead. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, almost gentle, the way executioners sometimes sound right before the blade falls. Send word to the captain of the guard. The soldiers who witnessed are to be reassigned immediately. Split them up, scattered to different posts. Scotland, Ireland, the colonies if necessary. Pemberton nodded. And the documents? Must be retrieved before they reach the king. The monk won't give them up willingly. Sir Edmund's smile was thin as a knife edge. Then he'll give them up unwillingly, one way or another. The question is what to do about Ravenshire. Blackwell leaned forward. We can't kill a duke, not openly, not without... We can destroy him. Sir Edmund cut across. Strip his title, seize his holdings, expose his affair in ways that make him radioactive to every ally he's ever had. Make him untouchable, irrelevant. And Lady Ashcroft? Crow asked. Sir Edmund considered. Vivian Ashcroft is leverage. Keep her alive. Keep her close. Make it clear to Ravenshire that her continued breathing depends entirely on his silence about everything he thinks he knows. What about Richard? Pemberton's voice carried weight. He's locked in the Tower with actual evidence against him. Evidence that leads back to us, Sir Edmund finished. To decisions we made, policies we enabled, the entire structure we've spent decades building. Yes, I'm aware. He stood, moved to the window, looked out at London spreading vast and dirty beneath gray sky. Richard Ashcroft was useful, but useful men become expendable the moment they threaten the system. We'll let him hang, publicly condemn his crimes, position it as proof that justice works, that no one is above the law. Even when they are, Blackwell muttered, especially when they are. Sir Edmund turned back. That's what makes the lie believable. Sacrifice the individual to protect the structure. Give the people their villain. Let them think the rot has been cut out. Pemberton frowned. And when they ask who enabled Richard, who benefited from his crimes, we express shock, horror. Demand investigations, and make sure those investigations lead absolutely nowhere. Sir Edmund's voice hardened. This isn't complicated, gentlemen. We've weathered worse storms, not with the Duke actively working against us. Then we break the Duke. Sir Edmund sat back down. Make him understand that truth is a luxury afforded only to those with nothing left to lose. Ravenshire still has things to lose, starting with the woman he's been fucking for 7 years. Crow shifted his weight. They seemed willing to burn it all down last night. Both of them. Seemed is the operative word. Sir Edmund picked up his pen, started writing. Let's see how committed they remain when consequences stop being abstract. Back at the Abbey, Nathaniel stood in ruins older than his title watching soldiers prepare to transport Richard Ashcroft to whatever passed for justice in a kingdom built on convenient lies. Brother Elias sat on a broken pew organizing his documents. 70 years of collected evidence, proof of crimes that would shake the foundations of power itself. If it ever reached the right eyes. Vivian stood apart, near the entrance, wrapped in Nathaniel's cloak, watching rain fall through gaps in the roof. Nathaniel moved to her, kept his voice low. We should leave. Before more arrive. Leave for where? She didn't look at him. Where exactly do you think we go after this? Anywhere. My estate in the north, the continent. Somewhere they own everywhere, Nathaniel. Her laugh was broken glass. You think geography matters when you've just declared war on men who control the kingdom itself? He wanted to argue. Found he couldn't. Because she was right. The same calculation that had served him 2 decades told him the truth with brutal clarity. They'd won the battle, exposed Richard, survived the night. But the war? That was just beginning. A soldier approached. Young, nervous. Your Grace, we've been ordered to escort you and Lady Ashcroft to London, to give testimony before... Before whom? Nathaniel's voice went cold. The king? Parliament? Or the men who actually make decisions? The soldier blinked. I don't understand. No. You don't. Nathaniel turned away. And that's precisely the problem. Brother Elias looked up from his documents. They'll try to bury this. You know that. Let them try. Nathaniel's jaw set. I'll shout it from every platform they give me. I'll make sure you'll be dead before you finish the first sentence. The old monk's voice was gentle, sad. I've watched powerful men for 7 decades, Your Grace. I know how they operate. They don't silence through violence when reputation works better. They'll destroy your credibility, make you seem mad, obsessed. A duke who risked everything for his mistress and now spins conspiracy theories to justify his choices. Nathaniel stared at him. You think I should stay quiet? I think you should be strategic. Brother Elias stood, staff in hand. The documents are proof. But proof only matters if it reaches people who will act on it. Screaming truth to men who profit from lies accomplishes nothing except getting you removed from the board. So what? We just surrender? We prepare. Brother Elias gripped his staff tighter. We protect what matters. And we wait for the moment when truth becomes more valuable than silence. Vivian finally turned. Her face was pale, exhausted. What if that moment never comes? Then we make it come. Nathaniel moved to her, took her hands, forced her to meet his eyes. I didn't burn my life down to watch them reconstruct the same lies with different players. You burned your life down for me. Her voice cracked. Don't pretend this was about justice. It was both. He said it quietly. Certainly. It was always both. Outside, more horses arrived. The sound of armed men. Orders shouted. The machinery of power asserting control. A different soldier entered. Older. Captain's insignia. Face like carved wood. Duke Ravenshire. Lady Ashcroft. You're to accompany us to London immediately. Separate carriages. No communication during transport. Nathaniel's hand found his knife. Under whose authority? The crown's. Which crown? The king or the men who tell him what to think? The captain's expression didn't change. My orders are clear, Your Grace. You can accompany us peacefully or in chains. The choice is yours. Nathaniel looked at Vivian, at the woman he'd chosen over everything, saw fear in her eyes, but also something else, something harder, resolute. She gave the smallest nod. Fine. Nathaniel released his knife. We'll go. But as they moved towards separate carriages, as soldiers surrounded them with polite threat, Brother Elias caught Nathaniel's arm. The old monk pressed something into his palm. Small. Cold. Metal. A key. Remember, Brother Elias whispered, truth waits, but only for those strong enough to survive until it matters. Nathaniel closed his fist around the key. What does this later? The monk's eyes were urgent. When you need it most, you'll know. Then they were being separated. Vivian into one carriage, Nathaniel into another, Brother Elias and his documents into a third. The convoy moved through Blackwood Forest toward London, toward whatever awaited them in a city that had just watched one of its most powerful advisors exposed as a murderer, toward consequences neither of them could predict. Inside his carriage, Nathaniel examined the key. Small, old, no markings, just smooth metal worn by years of handling. He tucked it inside his coat, against his chest, where he could feel it with every breath. Outside the window, forest gave way to farmland, farmland to villages, villages to the sprawling mass of London itself, the city where he'd built his power, where he'd learned to swim in poisoned waters, where he was about to discover just how deep those waters ran. Dusk. They separated them immediately upon arrival. Vivian to a townhouse owned by the crown, comfortable prison with guards at every door. Nathaniel to his own estate, same arrangement, different walls. Brother Elias disappeared entirely, the documents with him. For 3 days, Nathaniel paced rooms he'd lived in for 20 years, sent messages that went unanswered, demanded meetings that were politely declined, watched guards outside his windows with faces that gave nothing away. On the fourth day, Sir Edmund Corvus came to visit. The king's secretary arrived alone. No soldiers, no witnesses. Just a man in expensive clothes carrying a leather portfolio. They sat in Nathaniel's study, the same room where he'd plotted strategy with men he'd now condemned, where he'd signed orders and made deals that kept the machinery of power grinding forward. Sir Edmund didn't waste time on pleasantries. "You've created quite a problem, Duke Ravenshire." Nathaniel leaned back in his chair. "I exposed a murderer. That's not a problem. That's justice." "Is it?" Sir Edmund smiled. Thin, controlled. Justice suggests a system designed to reveal truth and punish wrongdoing. What you've done is throw a grenade into a carefully balanced structure and now act surprised that people are bleeding. People were already bleeding. Nathaniel's voice went hard. They've been bleeding for decades while men like Richard Ashcroft profited from suffering. Men like Richard Ashcroft. Sir Edmund repeated slowly. Not men like you. The words hung there. Sharp, precise. Nathaniel said nothing. Because what could he say? That his hands were clean? They weren't. That his rise to power had been ethical? It hadn't been. That the compromises he'd made were somehow noble because he occasionally felt guilty? Sir Edmund leaned forward. Let me explain how this ends, Your Grace. Richard will hang, very publicly, very righteously. The kingdom will celebrate justice being served, and you will be quietly destroyed. Try it. No trying necessary. Sir Edmund opened his portfolio, pulled out papers. I have testimony from 17 witnesses placing you at the Abbey with Lady Ashcroft on multiple occasions over 7 years. I have love letters, detailed accounts of your affair, evidence that will make you a pariah in every circle that matters. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. And I have something much worse. Sir Edmund placed a single document on the desk. A medical report, signed by physicians you trust, stating that Lady Ashcroft attempted suicide 2 nights ago, slit her wrists in her bath. The only reason she survived was because guards heard the splash. Nathaniel's world stopped. No. His voice came out strangled. You're lying, am I? Sir Edmund's expression didn't change. Would you like me to arrange a visit? Let you see the bandages yourself? Nathaniel stood, chair crashing back. I want to see her, now. That can be arranged. Sir Edmund's voice stayed level. Calm. After we discuss terms. Terms? Sir Edmund gestured to the chair. Sit down, Duke Ravenshire. Let's speak honestly for once in our lives. Nathaniel didn't move. Your lover tried to kill herself, Sir Edmund continued, because she understands what you refuse to accept. That exposure changes nothing. That the men in power will remain in power. That all you've accomplished is ruining her life and yours for the illusion of righteousness. If she's hurt because of she's hurt because you made her believe there was another way. Sir Edmund stood, faced him across the desk. You gave her hope. And hope, Your Grace, is the cruelest thing you can offer someone trapped in an unwinnable situation. Nathaniel's hands became fists. What do you want? Your silence. Total? Complete. Eternal. You will make no further accusations, pursue no investigations, contact no allies. You will accept that Richard Ashcroft acted alone, that his crimes were individual failures of character, not symptoms of systemic rot. And if I refuse, then Lady Ashcroft's next suicide attempt will succeed. Sir Edmund said it without inflection. And you'll spend the rest of your days knowing you chose your pride over her life. The study felt too small, too airless. Nathaniel couldn't breathe right. Let me see her. His voice cracked. Please. Sir Edmund considered, nodded. One visit, supervised, brief. Make your choice clear to her. Silence and survival. Or truth and destruction. He moved toward the door, stopped, turned back. One more thing, Your Grace. Brother Elias and his documents. Where are they? I don't know. Sir Edmund's eyes went cold. Find out. Tell me. Or Vivian pays the price for your protection of a delusional old man's crusade. Then he was gone. Guards closing the door behind him, leaving Nathaniel alone with impossible choices and the key pressed against his chest. The key Brother Elias had given him. Truth waits. the old monk had said, but only for those strong enough to survive until it matters. Nathaniel pulled out the key, studied it in lamplight. No markings, no indication of what it opened. But Brother Elias didn't do anything without purpose, which meant somewhere in London, locked behind whatever door this key fit, was something important enough that the old monk had risked everything to preserve it. Evidence, proof, truth that could actually change things, if Nathaniel could find it, if he was willing to risk Vivian to do it. He stood there in his study holding a small piece of metal while the weight of the world pressed down, calculating, measuring costs. The old Nathaniel, the one who'd built power through ruthless pragmatism, knew exactly what to do. Accept Sir Edmund's terms, protect Vivian, survive to fight another day from a position of strength. But that Nathaniel had died in the Abbey the moment he chose truth over self-preservation. What remained was something else, something less polished, more dangerous. A man who'd discovered that some things mattered more than survival, even if he wasn't entirely sure what to do with that knowledge yet. They let him see Vivian the next morning. The townhouse was elegant, expensive, a cage built from silk and polish, guards at every entrance, servants who watched with eyes that reported everything. She sat in a drawing room overlooking a garden, dressed in gray, hair pulled back, hands resting in her lap. Bandaged hands. Nathaniel stopped in the doorway. Something in his chest broke clean through. She looked up, saw him, and whatever control she'd been maintaining shattered. He crossed the room, dropped to his knees beside her chair, took her bandaged hands as gently as he could. Why? His voice was wrecked. Why would you? Because I couldn't breathe, she said it quietly, simply. They put me in this beautiful room with these beautiful things, and I couldn't breathe. All I could think was that you were somewhere alone taking blame for choices I made too, and I just wanted it to stop. Vivian. He pressed his forehead to her hands. I'm so sorry. For what? Her laugh was broken. For being honest? For exposing Richard? For 7 years of the only happiness I've ever known? For not protecting you better? You can't protect me from this. She pulled one hand free, touched his face. No one can. We broke the rules, Nathaniel, and now we pay the price. He looked up, met her eyes. They want me to stay silent, to accept that Richard acted alone, to bury everything else we know. I know, she nodded. They told me the same thing, and they made it very clear what happens if we refuse. We could run. He said it without conviction, because he already knew. Where? She smiled sadly. They own the kingdom, own the ports, own every road and border crossing. We're not running from law enforcement. We're running from the structure itself. Then we fight. With what? She gestured to the elegant room. The guards outside, the bandages on her wrists. We have no power here, no allies, no leverage. We have truth. Truth, she repeated, as if testing the word. Do you really think truth matters to men like Sir Edmund Corvus? Truth is just another tool they control. Brother Elias doesn't think so. Nathaniel pulled out the key, showed her. He gave me this, before they separated us. Said I'd know when I needed it. Vivian stared at the key. What does it open? I don't know. But the monk spent 70 years collecting evidence, building cases against people who thought themselves untouchable. This opens something he wanted me to find. Or it's a trap. Her voice went flat. Another way for them to destroy what's left of us. Maybe. Nathaniel closed his fist around the key. Or maybe it's exactly what Elias said. A chance to make truth matter more than silence. At what cost? Vivian's eyes filled. How many more people have to suffer before you accept we can't win this? I don't know if we can win. He said it honestly. But I know what happens if we surrender. Richard hangs, Sir Edmund and his allies continue running the kingdom into the ground. And 10 years from now, someone else stands where we're standing making the same impossible choice. So you'd sacrifice me, us, everything, for some abstract principle of justice. No. He gripped her hands tighter, careful of the bandages. I'd sacrifice everything because the woman I love tried to kill herself rather than live in a world where power always wins and truth always loses. Because that world isn't worth surviving in. She closed her eyes. Tears tracked down her face. When she opened them again, something had changed. The brokenness was still there. But underneath, something harder, colder, sharper. The same thing that had looked at Nathaniel in the Abbey and said, "I want to burn it all down." "Find what the key opens," she said quietly. "Whatever it is, wherever it leads. Find it. Vivian, I'm not strong enough to fight them." Her voice cracked. "But maybe you are. Maybe there's still one move left that they haven't seen coming. If I do this, if I push forward, they'll hurt you." "They're already hurting me." She pulled her hands free, stood, moved to the window. At least make it mean something. At least make them work for it. A guard appeared in the doorway. "Time's up, Your Grace." Nathaniel stood, wanted to reach for her. Couldn't, because touching her again would break whatever fragile resolve she'd assembled. He moved to the door, stopped, looked back. "I love you." He said it simply. "Certainly. And I'm going to end this, one way or another." "I know." She didn't turn from the window. "That's what terrifies me." Then he was being escorted out, through elegant hallways, past guards who watched with faces carved from stone, into a carriage that would return him to his own prison. As London rolled past outside the window, Nathaniel turned the key over and over in his hands. Brother Elias had said truth waits. Fine. Then Nathaniel would find what the old monk wanted him to find, would crack open whatever secrets the key protected, would drag into daylight every piece of corruption Sir Edmund Corvus thought safely buried. And if it cost him everything? Well, he'd already lost everything that mattered the moment Vivian slit her wrists in a bathtub. What remained was just details. The carriage pulled up to his estate. Guards waited. More watchers, more walls. Nathaniel climbed out, headed inside, moved straight to his study. He had work to do. Because somewhere in London, hidden behind a lock only this key would open, waited proof that could actually change things. He just had to find it before Sir Edmund's patience ran out, before they made good on their threats, before the window closed completely. And standing there in his study with a small metal key and impossible odds, Duke Nathaniel Ravenshire did what he'd always done when backed into corners. He started calculating, measuring angles, looking for the one move his enemies wouldn't see coming. The move that would either save everything or destroy what little remained. But either way, the move that would force truth into a world that had spent too long drowning in convenient lies. Outside his window, a figure watched from across the street. Same messenger who'd witnessed the Abbey confrontation. Thomas Crow. Still reporting, still observing. And as he watched Duke Ravenshire pace his study holding a key that could unlock secrets powerful men had killed to protect, Crow pulled out a small journal and made a single notation. Time, 4:47 p.m. Subject appears to have made decision. Recommend immediate escalation, because Sir Edmund Corvus had given specific orders. The moment Ravenshire stopped accepting his cage and started hunting for Brother Elias's evidence, the game changed. The gloves came off, and what happened next would make everything that came before look like mercy. Nathaniel spent 2 days trying to figure out what the key opened. 2 days pacing his estate while guards watched his every move. 2 days examining every possibility while the window for action closed tighter. The key was old. No manufacturer marks, no serial numbers, just smooth metal worn by decades of handling. It could open anything, which meant it could open nothing without context. He needed Brother Elias, needed the old monk's guidance, but the monk had vanished completely after their arrival in London. No word. No messages, just silence. On the third morning, a note arrived, slipped under his door while guards changed shifts. No signature, just an address in Southwark and a time. Midnight. Nathaniel knew a trap when he saw one. Every instinct honed by 20 years of political survival screamed danger, but instinct also told him this was the only move left on the board. So when midnight came, he went. Getting past his own guards was easier than it should have been. A lifetime of navigating palace intrigue had taught him things. Secret exits, blind spots and surveillance, the particular rhythm of bored men watching empty hallways. He slipped out through the servant quarters, took back streets through London's maze of alleys and crooked lanes, kept his head down, moved like the criminal he'd technically become the moment he chose Vivian over propriety. Southwark at midnight was a different world from the elegant districts where power lived. Here, the city showed its real face: poverty, desperation, the grinding machinery that kept the aristocracy comfortable, while the actual people who built England scraped by on nothing. The address led to a warehouse near the docks. Old, sagging, windows dark. Nathaniel approached carefully, hand on his knife, eyes scanning for watchers. The door was unlocked. Inside, a single lantern burned in the center of a vast empty space, crates stacked against walls, shadows thick enough to hide armies. And standing beside the lantern, exactly where Nathaniel knew he would be, Brother Elias. The old monk looked smaller somehow, frailer, like the weight of what he carried had finally become too much. "You came." Elias's voice was tired, grateful. "I wasn't certain you would." Nathaniel closed the door behind him. "Where have you been? They're tearing the city apart looking for you and your documents." "Hiding," Brother Elias gestured to the warehouse. "In places men like Sir Edmund Corvus forget exist. Among people he doesn't see. The documents, are they safe?" "Safe as anything can be in a kingdom where truth is treated as treason." The monk moved to a crate, pulled back canvas covering, revealed stacks of papers, ledgers, letters, evidence of decades of corruption, all preserved, all documented, all utterly useless without someone willing to act on it. Nathaniel crossed to examine the documents. Even in dim lantern light, he could see the weight of what Brother Elias had collected. Names he recognized, crimes he'd suspected, proof of systematic rot that went far beyond Richard Ashcroft's murders. This could destroy them. He said it quietly. All of them. It could. Brother Elias agreed. If it reaches the right people. If those people have courage to act. If the system allows truth to matter more than self-preservation. Too many ifs. Yes. The monk's smile was sad. That's always been the problem. Truth without power is just noise, and power without conscience is just tyranny. Nathaniel pulled out the key, held it up. "What does this open?" Brother Elias's expression changed. Something like hope flickered across his ancient face. "Follow me." He led Nathaniel to the back of the warehouse, to a section walled off from the rest, hidden behind rotting crates and forgotten equipment. Behind that wall, a door. Heavy, iron-bound, locked. Brother Elias gestured to the keyhole. Nathaniel inserted the key, felt tumblers click. The lock opened with a sound like bones settling. Inside, a room no bigger than a cell. And in that room, something Nathaniel hadn't expected. A printing press. Old, but functional. Ready to turn evidence into something that could actually spread. That could reach beyond the circles of power into the streets where people lived. Brother Elias moved past him, ran his hand over the press with something like affection. "I've been preparing for this moment for 40 years, waiting for someone with enough influence to make it matter, enough courage to risk everything. You want me to print this?" Nathaniel stared at the press, distributed across London. "I want you to make truth louder than the lies trying to bury it." Brother Elias turned, fixed him with eyes that had seen too much. Sir Edmund and his allies control the official channels, the newspapers, the courts, the throne itself. But they don't control the streets. Not yet. Printing unsanctioned material is treason. Everything you've done for the past week is treason. The monk's voice was gentle. The question isn't whether you'll be punished, it's whether the punishment will mean something. Nathaniel examined the press. Calculated odds, measured risks. If I do this, if I flood London with evidence of corruption, they'll kill me. Probably. They'll hurt Vivian, almost certainly. Then why? Nathaniel turned, faced the old monk. Why would I choose that over survival, over protecting the woman I love? Brother Elias moved closer. When I was young, I watched a good man burned at the stake for speaking truth to power. I stood in the crowd and did nothing. Said nothing. Told myself that silence was wisdom, that survival mattered more than righteousness. He paused, drew breath that sounded painful. I've carried that cowardice for 70 years, watched it multiply, watched silence enable atrocity after atrocity, and I swore that if I ever had another chance to choose differently, I would. That's your guilt, not mine, isn't it? The monk's eyes were sharp. You've spent 20 years enabling the same system, making the same calculations, choosing power over principle, and now you have exactly one chance to be something other than what you've always been. At what cost? Everything. Brother Elias didn't flinch, but at least it will be for something real, something that might actually change the trajectory of a kingdom drowning in its own corruption. Nathaniel turned back to the press, ran his hand over cold metal, felt the weight of what Elias was asking. Print the evidence, distribute it across London, watch the city tear itself apart as decades of lies came crashing down, and in the chaos, lose everything. His title, his life, Vivian, but maybe, just maybe, force truth into a system built to reject it. He was still weighing the choice when footsteps echoed through the warehouse. Many footsteps. Nathaniel's hand went to his knife. Brother Elias's face went pale. The door to the warehouse crashed open. Soldiers poured through. 20, 30, armed and armored, moving with precision that spoke of careful planning, and walking behind them, stepping into lantern light with the confidence of men who'd already won. Sir Edmund Corvus. But not alone. Beside him, face carefully neutral, hands bound in front of him like a prisoner, Thomas Crow, the messenger who'd watched the Abbey, who'd reported back to London. Except his hands weren't actually bound, the ropes hung loose, decorative, and when Sir Edmund gestured, Crow moved to stand beside him, not as prisoner, as ally. Nathaniel's mind raced, calculating, understanding flooding through him cold as winter water. "Well done, Thomas," Sir Edmund said quietly. "Your performance was excellent." Crow nodded, didn't look at Nathaniel, didn't meet the eyes of the man he'd just betrayed. Brother Elias made a sound like something breaking. "Thomas, I trusted you, I know." Crow's voice was flat, empty. "And I'm sorry, but you were always going to lose this fight. Better to be on the winning side when it ends." Sir Edmund moved deeper into the warehouse, eyes scanning the stacks of documents, the printing press, everything Nathaniel and Brother Elias had hoped to use. "Thank you for gathering it all in one place." The secretary's smile was thin, sharp. "Saves us considerable effort." Nathaniel found his voice. "How long? How long has Thomas been working for us?" Sir Edmund glanced at Crow. "Tell him." 3 years. Crow said it without emotion. "Since Brother Elias first approached me about helping preserve his evidence. I reported every conversation, every document, every plan." The monk staggered, caught himself on a crate. 3 years. We knew about your little crusade long before Duke Ravenshire stumbled into it. Sir Edmund moved to examine the printing press. Knew about this warehouse. These documents. Everything. We simply waited for the right moment to shut it down completely. Nathaniel's world tilted, every calculation revised, every assumption shattered. Because if Crow had been reporting for 3 years, then nothing about the past week had been real. The Abbey confrontation, the exposure of Richard, the documents Brother Elias thought safely hidden, all of it had been theater, a carefully orchestrated performance designed to draw out everyone who might threaten the system. "You used Richard." Nathaniel's voice was rough. "Let us expose him. Let him hang." Richard was already compromised. Sir Edmund shrugged. Too reckless, too visible. His murders were sloppy. Eventually someone would have discovered them regardless. Better to sacrifice him in a way that looked like justice, while simultaneously identifying everyone else who might cause problems. Problems like me. Problems like you. Sir Edmund agreed. Duke Ravenshire, war hero, political operator, man with enough influence to actually threaten the structure if he ever decided to stop benefiting from it. We needed to know where your loyalties truly lay, whether you were salvageable, and you chose poorly. Sir Edmund's voice went cold. Love makes men stupid. Righteousness makes them dangerous. The combination is intolerable. He gestured to soldiers. Secure the Duke. Take Brother Elias into custody. Burn the documents. Dismantle the press. Men moved forward. Hands reached for Nathaniel. He didn't fight, didn't resist, just stood there while they bound his wrists, while they dragged Brother Elias away from his life's work, while soldiers began stacking documents for burning. Because what was the point? They'd already won. Had won before the game even started. Every move Nathaniel thought he'd made had been anticipated, allowed, controlled. Sir Edmund moved close, spoke quietly so only Nathaniel could hear. Lady Ashcroft is being relocated as we speak. Somewhere you'll never find her. Somewhere she can live out her days in comfortable imprisonment. She'll be told you died in a fire. Tragic, unavoidable. The merciful version of what we could do. You don't have to hurt her. Nathaniel's voice cracked. She's leverage, Sir Edmund cut across. And leverage only works if the threat is credible. So here's what happens next. You disappear. Officially, you'll be sent to the colonies, some administrative posting far from London. In reality, you'll be held somewhere we control completely, and every day you resist, every attempt you make to expose what you know. We hurt her a little more. His smile was gentle, paternal, almost kind. Eventually you'll break. They always do. You'll accept that silence is the only mercy available, that protecting her is the only power you have left, and you'll spend whatever years remain grateful we let you both live. Nathaniel stared at him, at this man who'd turned truth itself into a weapon, who'd spent decades perfecting control so complete it anticipated resistance before it formed. And something inside Nathaniel, the part that had built power through ruthless calculation, recognized the artistry, the precision, the cold perfection of Sir Edmund's system. It was everything Nathaniel had aspired to, everything he'd built toward, the ultimate expression of control over chaos. He should have admired it. Instead, he felt something break. Not his spirit, not his will, something deeper. The machinery that had driven him for 20 years. The calculation engine that measured every action by outcomes. The part of him that had always chosen power over principle. It shattered. And what remained was something rawer, simpler, more dangerous. A man with nothing left to lose looking at another man who thought control was the same as victory. Where is she? Nathaniel's voice was quiet, deadly. Where is Vivian? Sir Edmund's smile widened. Somewhere you'll never reach. Somewhere your title and influence mean nothing. Somewhere, the Royal Safe House in Kensington. Thomas Crow's voice cut across. 3rd floor, East Wing, guarded by 12 men rotating 8-hour shifts. Every eye turned to him. Crow stood very still, face pale, hands trembling slightly. But his voice was steady. She's being held in the same room they kept the French ambassador's daughter 3 years ago. The one with bars on the windows and guards at the door. I filed the transfer orders myself this afternoon. Sir Edmund's expression went cold. Thomas, what are you doing? The right thing. Crow said it quietly, finally. Then he pulled a knife from his coat. Not to threaten anyone, just held it, ready. I've spent 3 years watching you destroy good people. Watching you turn truth into treason and justice into a joke. I told myself I was being smart, practical, that survival mattered more than principle. He glanced at Brother Elias, at the old monk whose trust he'd betrayed. I was wrong. Sir Edmund's voice dropped to a whisper. You fool, you've just killed yourself. Probably. Crow agreed, but at least I won't die wondering if I could have chosen differently. He threw the knife, not at Sir Edmund, at the rope binding Nathaniel's wrists. The blade cut clean. Rope fell away. Chaos erupted. Soldiers moved, weapons drawn. Crow went down under 3 men, didn't fight back, just curled up and took the beating. Nathaniel didn't hesitate, didn't think, just moved the way he'd learned in back alleys before power taught him to delegate violence. He grabbed the nearest soldier's sword, used momentum to drive it through the man's throat, kicked the dying body into 2 others, created space, distance. Brother Elias grabbed a crate, swung it into soldiers trying to flank, old arms still strong enough to do damage when backed into corners. The warehouse became a war zone. Steel on steel. Blood on stone. Men screaming. Men dying. Nathaniel fought like something unleashed. No calculation, no strategy, just pure survival instinct refined by decades of swimming in poisoned waters. He killed 3 men in the first minute, wounded 4 more, created enough chaos that soldiers couldn't coordinate. But there were too many. Too many swords, too many bodies, and Nathaniel had nothing but rage and desperation. A blade caught his shoulder. Pain bloomed hot and immediate. He spun, killed the man who'd cut him, but more pressed in. This was how it ended. Bleeding out in a Southwark warehouse while Sir Edmund watched, while everything he'd tried to build came apart. Then Brother Elias shouted, Fire! Nathaniel's eyes snapped to the documents. To the stacks of evidence soldiers had been preparing to burn. Brother Elias stood beside them, lantern in hand, face set with absolute resolve. If we can't save truth, the old monk said quietly, we can at least make them work for the lies. He dropped the lantern. Oil splashed across paper, across crates, across the dried wood of a building that hadn't seen maintenance in decades. Flames erupted, fast, hungry, spreading with terrifying speed. Soldiers scattered, self-preservation overriding orders. Because burning alive for Sir Edmund's schemes wasn't in anyone's contract. Sir Edmund screamed orders, tried to maintain control. But fire doesn't listen to authority. Fire just burns. Nathaniel grabbed Brother Elias, dragged the old monk toward the back exit, away from spreading flames, away from soldiers and smoke and the warehouse collapsing into chaos. They burst into night air, into alleys thick with fog, ran while behind them the building became an inferno, while evidence of decades of corruption burned to ash and smoke. While Sir Edmund Corvis's careful plans went up in flames, they ran until breathing hurt, until distance and darkness gave some illusion of safety, collapsed in an alley 3 streets over, gasping, bleeding, alive. Nathaniel's shoulder burned where the blade had caught him. Not deep, but enough to bleed through his coat. Brother Elias looked worse, 70 years of life catching up all at once, face gray, hands shaking, but alive. Both of them, against odds that should have been impossible. The evidence. Brother Elias's voice was broken. 70 years, all gone. Nathaniel grabbed his arm. Listen to me. We don't have time for grief. Vivian is in Kensington, guarded, and we have maybe an hour before Sir Edmund regroups. What can we do? The monk's eyes were defeated. We have nothing. No proof. No allies. No, we have Crow's information. Nathaniel cut across. We have surprise. We have the fact that they think we burned in that warehouse, and we have exactly one chance to get her out before they realize we survived. Brother Elias stared at him. You can't assault a royal safe house. That's suicide. Nathaniel agreed. But I'm not leaving her in their hands, not after everything. The old monk closed his eyes, drew breath, opened them again with something like clarity. Then we'll need help, the kind of help desperate men turn to when official channels have failed them completely. Who? Brother Elias smiled. Grim, determined. The people Sir Edmund has spent his life stepping on. The ones who remember what England was supposed to be before men like him turned it into a feeding trough for aristocrats. Can they fight? Some can. Others will provide distraction. Cover. The thing about crushing people for decades is eventually they stop caring about consequences. They just want to see you bleed. Nathaniel helped the monk stand. Blood dripped from his shoulder. His hands shook with exhaustion and pain. But his mind was clear, his purpose absolute. Because somewhere in Kensington, Vivian sat in a guarded room believing he was dead, believing she'd lost everything for nothing, believing the system had won, and Nathaniel would burn the whole city down before letting that stand. They moved through London's dark heart, through streets where power's light didn't reach, where people lived and died unnoticed by the men who claimed to govern them. And in those streets, Brother Elias called in 70 years of favors, spoke to people who remembered kindnesses, who owed debts, who simply wanted one chance to strike back at the machine that had ground them down. By the time dawn threatened the horizon, they had assembled something that might generously be called an army. Dock workers, laborers, former soldiers, criminals, people with nothing to lose and scores to settle. 40 men, maybe 50. Armed with whatever they could find, clubs, knives, a few old swords, rage. Against 12 trained guards in a fortified position. Impossible odds. Nathaniel stood before them in an alley 3 blocks from the Kensington safe house. Blood on his coat, death in his eyes. I'm not going to lie to you, his voice carried in the pre-dawn darkness. Most of us won't survive this. The men guarding that building are professionals. They have position, equipment, training. He paused. Let the weight settle. But they also have something we don't. They believe the system protects them, that no matter what they do, the structure will preserve their power. Another pause. Tonight, we prove them wrong. Tonight, we show them that power built on suffering only lasts until the suffering gets organized, until the people you've been stepping on decide enough is enough. He met their eyes, one by one, saw desperation, anger, hope. The woman they're holding in there is innocent. Her only crime was loving someone the powerful didn't approve of. They're going to hurt her, use her, destroy her, unless we stop them. So here's what I'm asking. Help me get her out. Help me prove that courage matters more than position. That 40 people willing to risk everything can beat 12 who fight only for a paycheck. He drew his sword, stolen from a dead soldier, still slicked with blood. Who's with me? For a moment, silence. These weren't heroes, weren't trained warriors, just desperate people weighing survival against something approaching justice. Then a dock worker stepped forward. Scarred face, missing teeth, club in hand. I'm in. His voice was rough, simple. My daughter died in a factory fire because the owner bribed inspectors. If there's even a chance to make them bleed, I'll take it. Others followed, one by one, building momentum. A former soldier, a widow whose husband was hanged for stealing bread. A young man who'd watched guards beat his brother to death for disrespecting a nobleman. All of them carrying wounds inflicted by a system that valued property over people, order over justice. All of them willing to die for one chance to strike back. Nathaniel looked at Brother Elias. The old monk nodded. Then let's go. They moved through London's waking streets. 40 desperate souls marching toward a fortified building where 12 professional guards held one woman prisoner. Marching toward consequences none could predict. Marching because sometimes survival isn't enough. Sometimes the only thing that matters is forcing truth into a world that's spent too long drowning in convenient lies, even if it costs everything. And watching from a rooftop 3 blocks away, a figure in dark clothes observed their approach. One of Sir Edmund's many watchers, the ones who never stopped, who reported everything, who would carry word that Duke Nathaniel Ravenshire hadn't died in the fire after all, that he was instead leading an army of rabble toward a royal safehouse in broad daylight. The watcher pulled out a small mirror, flashed a signal to another watcher 2 streets over, who flashed to another, who sent a runner. And within minutes, the message was moving, reaching Sir Edmund, who would respond with overwhelming force, because this wasn't just about stopping Nathaniel anymore. This was about crushing any idea that common people could challenge the structure itself, about making an example so brutal that no one would ever dare try again. The trap was closing, and Nathaniel had just walked straight into it. The Kensington safe house stood 3 stories of gray stone at the end of a street that dead-ended against a brick wall. Strategic positioning, defensible, the kind of architecture that announced its purpose without saying a word. Nathaniel crouched behind a market cart 2 blocks away, studied the building through pre-dawn gloom, counted guards visible on the perimeter, 6 outside, which meant at least that many inside, plus however many rotated through shifts. Beside him, Brother Elias wheezed. The old monk's face was ashen. Running through London's streets had cost him, but his eyes were sharp, focused. The east wing. Elias pointed with a trembling finger. 3rd floor, 5 windows from the corner. That's where they'll have her. Nathaniel memorized the layout, stone walls, iron bars on upper windows. Single entrance at street level flanked by guards who looked bored but competent. Behind them, 40 desperate souls waited in shadows. Men who'd spent their lives being invisible to power. Who'd survived by knowing when to duck and when to run. Who were about to throw themselves against professional soldiers because an old monk and a disgraced duke had convinced them it mattered. The mathematics were brutal. 40 untrained laborers against 12 career guards in a fortified position. The smart move was retreat, regroup, find another way. But there was no other way. Sir Edmund would relocate Vivian the moment he confirmed Nathaniel survived the warehouse fire. This window measured in minutes, not hours, not days. This or nothing. Nathaniel turned to face the men he was about to lead into slaughter, saw fear in their eyes, also rage, desperation, the particular recklessness of people who'd been pushed past caring about consequences. He understood that feeling intimately, had spent 20 years avoiding it through careful calculation and strategic compromise. But now? Now he stood on the other side of that equation, the place where survival stopped being enough, where the only thing that mattered was forcing truth into a world built on lies, even if it cost everything. Listen. His voice was low, urgent. We go in 3 groups. First team hits the front entrance, makes noise, draws attention. Second team goes through the service alley, looks for another way in. Third team with me. We climb. Climb. A dock worker named Sullivan frowned. To the 3rd floor? To wherever she is. Nathaniel met his eyes. I need 8 men willing to scale stone walls in darkness while guards try to kill us. Volunteers only. 7 hands went up immediately. An 8th followed after brief hesitation. Nathaniel nodded. Good. Brother Elias stays here, coordinates. If this goes wrong, when this goes wrong, Elias interrupted gently. And it will. These things always do. When it goes wrong, Nathaniel conceded. Pull back, scatter. Don't let them take you alive. They'll use you to get to others. The old monk's smile was sad. I've lived 73 years, most of them in fear. If I die tonight trying to do one right thing, I'll consider it a bargain. Nathaniel gripped his shoulder, felt bone beneath skin, the fragility of a man who'd carried weight far too long. Thank you. For everything. Save your thanks until we see if it works. Brother Elias gestured toward the safe house. Go. Before they finished waking up, Nathaniel turned to his assault team, 8 men with clubs and knives against a fortified position, the kind of odds that made military strategists laugh. But military strategists had never been desperate, had never stood in pre-dawn darkness, knowing the woman they loved was 5 windows from a corner on the 3rd floor, being held by men who'd hurt her just to prove they could. Desperation changed mathematics, made impossible odds irrelevant, because what difference did probability make when the alternative was living with failure? Move. Nathaniel's voice cut through fog. Now. They split into groups. First team, 15 strong, headed straight for the main entrance, started making noise, shouting, throwing rocks at windows, drawing attention the way bait draws predators. Second team vanished into shadows seeking the service alley, looking for doors, weak points, anything. Nathaniel led his 8 climbers wide, circling to approach the east wall from an angle guards wouldn't be watching, because guards were human, and humans have limitations. Blind spots, moments of inattention. You exploited those moments or you died. They reached the wall, stone worn smooth by centuries of London weather. No handholds obvious in darkness, just vertical rock and desperate need. Sullivan stepped forward, dock worker hands calloused from rope and cargo. I can do this. He jumped, caught a slight protrusion Nathaniel hadn't even seen, pulled himself up, found another grip, started climbing. The others followed, one by one, moving with the particular grace of men who'd spent lives doing physical labor, who knew their bodies, trusted muscle and bone when thought would have counseled surrender. Nathaniel went last. His shoulder screamed where the blade had caught him. Blood soaked through makeshift bandaging, but pain was just information, and right now the only information that mattered was height, distance, the gap between ground and 3rd floor. He climbed. Stone bit into fingers. Arms burned. The wound in his shoulder felt like fire spreading through meat. But he climbed. Below, shouting intensified. First team making their demonstration. Guards responding. Voices raised. The clatter of weapons being readied. Nathaniel pulled himself higher, past 1st floor windows, dark and empty. Past 2nd floor. Shadows moving inside. Guards repositioning. His hand found the 3rd floor ledge, gripped, pulled, and came face to face with iron bars. The window was secured, heavy iron set deep into stone. No way through without tools they didn't have, time they couldn't spare. Sullivan appeared beside him, breathing hard, face slicked with sweat despite cold air. We could try the next window. No. Nathaniel studied the bars, the frame, the way iron met stone, saw a gap, narrow, barely wide enough for fingers. But there, he wedged his hand through, felt along the interior wall, found the window latch, tried to manipulate it through bars that limited movement to millimeters. Below, the sound of fighting. First team had engaged, steel on wood, voices screaming, the wet sounds of violence. They were dying down there, buying seconds with blood. Nathaniel's fingers found the latch mechanism. Worked it. Once. Twice. The angle was wrong. The grip impossible. But impossible had stopped meaning anything the moment he chose Vivian over survival. The latch gave. Click. Quiet as breath. The window swung inward. But the bars remained. Still locked in stone. Still blocking entry. Sullivan pulled a pry bar from his belt. Wedged it against iron. Leveraged. Muscles straining. Face contorting with effort. The iron groaned. Shifted. Centuries of weathering had weakened the stone around it. Not much, but enough that desperate strength applied with precision could make difference. The bar bent, pulled free from one anchor point, created a gap just wide enough for a man to squeeze through if he didn't mind leaving skin behind. Nathaniel went first, pushed through the gap, felt iron tear his coat, scrape ribs. Then he was through, inside, landing in darkness that smelled of dust and fear. The others followed, one by one. 8 men bleeding into a safe house that was supposed to be impregnable. They were in a hallway, narrow, lit by single candles spaced too far apart, doors on both sides, all closed. Nathaniel tried the nearest, locked. The next. Same. Footsteps on stairs. Guards responding to the breach. Coming fast. Sullivan and 2 others positioned themselves. Clubs ready. Eyes hard. Find her. Sullivan's voice was steady. We'll hold them. Nathaniel didn't argue, didn't waste time on gratitude, just moved. Down the hallway, trying doors, listening for sounds behind wood and iron. Behind him, fighting erupted. Sullivan and his men meeting guards in narrow space. The crash of bodies, screams, the particular sounds of men killing each other in darkness. Nathaniel kept moving. 4th door, 5th. Each one locked. Each one another second wasted while people died buying him time. Then he heard it. Faint. Almost hidden beneath the violence behind him. A voice. Female. Calling his name like a question she didn't believe would be answered. Vivienne. The next door. Had to be. Nathaniel slammed his shoulder against wood. Once. Twice. The wound reopened. Blood flowed hot down his side. But the door held. He stepped back. Kicked. Put everything into it. Every ounce of desperation and rage and love he'd been carrying. The lock shattered, door crashed inward, and there she was. Vivian Ashcroft, standing in the center of a small room, bandaged wrists, gray dress, hair loose around shoulders, eyes wide with shock and disbelief. She looked like everything he remembered, everything he'd risked everything for, everything that mattered more than survival or power or any calculation he'd ever made. Nathaniel. Her voice broke. They said you were dead. He crossed the room, grabbed her, felt her real and solid and alive in his arms, nearly collapsed from relief. Not dead, just stubborn. His voice was rough against her hair. We need to move. Now. How did you... Later. He pulled back, met her eyes. Can you run? She nodded, face setting with determination that matched his own. They moved to the door. Nathaniel looked out. The hallway was carnage. Sullivan and his men had held their position, but the cost showed in bodies, in blood-slicking stone floors, in the 2 men still standing who looked like they might fall any second. Guards were regrouping, coming upstairs with reinforcements, the window for escape closing fast. Nathaniel grabbed Vivienne's hand. This way. They ran. Past fighting, past dying men who'd thrown themselves into violence so 2 strangers could have minutes. Past guards who tried to stop them and met Sullivan's club for the effort. Reached the window they'd entered through. The gap in bars barely wide enough. You first. Nathaniel lifted Vivienne, helped her through, watched her squeeze past iron, emerge outside clinging to stone. Behind them, more guards, voices shouting orders, the sound of organized response overcoming desperate assault. Nathaniel looked back, met Sullivan's eyes across the hallway. The dock worker was bleeding from a dozen wounds, leaning on his club like it was the only thing keeping him upright. Go. Sullivan's voice was steady, certain. This is what we came for. Nathaniel hesitated. 1 second. That's all he gave himself for conscience, for guilt, for acknowledging that these men were dying so he could save one woman. Then he went through the window. Because Sullivan was right, this was exactly what they'd come for, and letting his sacrifice be meaningless would dishonor it worse than leaving. Outside, Vivian clung to stone, face pale in pre-dawn light. I don't know how to. Yes, you can. Nathaniel positioned himself below her, guided her feet to holds, talked her down inch by inch, moving with her, supporting when she slipped. They descended, slow, too slow. Any second guards would reach the window, would lean out, would end this with arrows or blades or simple physics. But they made it, touched ground, solid earth beneath boots. Brother Elias materialized from fog, face slack with relief. Thank God. I thought, no time. Nathaniel grabbed Vivian's hand, pulled her toward shadows, toward the maze of alleys that might give them distance. They ran. Behind them, the safe house erupted with activity. Guards pouring out, voices raised, the machinery of pursuit engaging. But London's streets belonged to people like Brother Elias, men who'd spent lifetimes navigating passages the powerful never saw. Who knew which doors opened to sympathetic faces, which alleys led nowhere except for those who understood the trick? They ran through that hidden London, the version that existed beneath official maps, where people survived by being invisible, by helping each other when the system offered only cruelty. Doors opened. Strangers pulled them through, closed barriers behind them, misdirected pursuit, because word had spread, about the Duke who challenged Sir Edmund Corvus, about the assault on the safe house, about desperate people standing up to the machine that ground them down. And in that word was something dangerous, something the powerful spent enormous energy suppressing: hope, the idea that resistance mattered, that courage could challenge control, that 40 people with nothing but rage and clubs could breach a fortified position and rescue someone the system had claimed. It wasn't victory. Not yet. Guards still hunted them. Sir Edmund still commanded vast resources. The structure remained intact. But the myth of invulnerability had cracked, and cracks spread. They reached a safe house of their own by the time dawn fully broke. A warehouse in Shadwell owned by a merchant who remembered Brother Elias from decades past, who opened doors without questions, who offered food and bandaging and time to breathe. Nathaniel collapsed against a wall. His shoulder was ruined. The climb and fighting had torn it open completely. He could feel blood pooling beneath his coat, could feel consciousness starting to gray at the edges. Vivian knelt beside him, hands on his face, checking his eyes, reading damage with the expertise of someone who'd watched people die before. "You're bleeding badly." Her voice was steady, clinical, but her hand shook. "We need to stop it, or—" "I know." He caught her wrist, felt pulse jumping beneath skin. "I know." Brother Elias appeared with cloth, water, the basic supplies field medicine required, started working on the wound with surprising competence. "You've done this before," Nathaniel managed through pain. 70 years in forgotten places. The monk didn't look up from his work. "You see things, learn things, or you die ignorant. The cleaning hurt worse than the original cut." Nathaniel gritted teeth, forced breath steady, refused to show weakness in front of Vivian, not because he was proud, but because she'd already seen him bleed enough, had already carried too much weight on his behalf. She deserved strength, even artificial strength, even strength held together by will alone. Brother Elias finished binding the wound, sat back, examined his work critically. "That'll hold. Maybe. If you don't do anything stupid like fighting or climbing or moving too quickly." Nathaniel laughed. Rough, bitter. "Then I'm dead by noon. Probably." The monk's smile was gentle. "But at least you'll die knowing you tried." Vivian made a sound, something between laugh and sob. "You're both insane, you know that." Nathaniel reached for her hand. "Found it, gripped tight. Maybe. But we got you out, that's what matters." "At what cost?" She gestured to his shoulder, to Brother Elias's exhausted face, to the warehouse around them that was just another temporary shelter before the next run. "How many people died at that safe house? How many—" "Enough!" Nathaniel cut across. "Enough people died, and they chose to, because some things are worth dying for." "Like what?" Her voice rose. "Like rescuing me? Like proving a point to men who'll just rebuild everything you broke? Like refusing to let them win?" He pulled her closer, ignored the fire in his shoulder. like showing them that control isn't the same as power, that you can have all the soldiers and all the gold and all the official authority in the world and still lose when people stop being afraid. She stared at him, tears tracking through dirt on her face. I tried to kill myself, her voice dropped to whisper, in that bathtub. I actually tried, because I couldn't see any way forward that didn't end in more suffering. I know, and you still came, still risked everything, still, yes, simple, certain. I'll always come. That's what you haven't understood. This isn't about winning. It's about refusing to accept that they get to decide who matters. A sound cut through the moment, distant but growing closer. Horses. Many horses. The organized thunder of armed men moving with purpose. Brother Elias moved to the window, peered through gaps in boards. His face went pale. Soldiers, royal guard, maybe 60, surrounding the building. Nathaniel forced himself upright. Agony screamed through his shoulder. How did they find us so fast? The merchant. A new voice from the doorway. Apologetic, familiar. They all turned. Thomas Crow stepped into the warehouse. Face bruised from the beating he'd taken, but alive. Mobile. And behind him, Sir Edmund Corvus. The king's secretary entered like a man walking into his own home, confident, controlled, flanked by guards who filled the doorway with steel and threat. Really, Duke Ravenshire? Sir Edmund's voice was disappointed, almost paternal. Did you truly think the merchant wouldn't send word? That loyalty bought with a few kind memories 30 years ago would outweigh gold and threat today? Nathaniel's hand found his sword. Met resistance from shoulder wound. Pushed through pain anyway. You made your point. His voice was steady. Let her go. This is between us. Is it? Sir Edmund gestured. Guards moved forward. Not attacking, just positioning, cutting off exits, establishing control. Because I think this stopped being about you and Lady Ashcroft the moment you led an army of rabble against a royal safehouse. The moment you made common laborers believe they could challenge the system itself. They can. Nathaniel raised his sword. We just proved it. You proved nothing except that we allow you to breathe only so long as it amuses us. Sir Edmund's voice went cold. The men who died at the safe house? Already buried, already forgotten. The merchant who sheltered you? Will be compensated and pardoned. The structure remains, only the players change. He stepped closer, studied Nathaniel like an interesting specimen. I offered you mercy, offered Vivian life. All you had to do was stay silent, but you couldn't. Pride wouldn't allow it. So now we demonstrate what happens when mercy is rejected. He nodded to guards. Kill the monk. Take the Duke and Lady Ashcroft alive. I want them to watch what comes next. Guards moved. Brother Elias didn't run, didn't beg, just stood there with 7 decades of living behind him and perfect clarity ahead. Nathaniel lunged, sword up, trying to reach Elias, trying to do something, anything. His shoulder gave, the wound tore open completely. He went down hard, sword clattering from nerveless fingers. Vivian screamed, threw herself between Elias and advancing guards, small body trying to shield old bones. A guard raised his blade. And Thomas Crow moved. The messenger who'd betrayed them stepped between steel and flesh, arms spread, face set. No! His voice carried. Clear, certain, this is wrong. Sir Edmund's expression didn't change. Thomas, move. No! Crow stood firmer. I've watched you destroy good people for years. Told myself it was necessary, that the system mattered more than individuals. But I was lying to myself. He turned, met Nathaniel's eyes. You asked me once what side I was on. I didn't know then, but I know now. He faced Sir Edmund again. I'm on the side that says this has to stop. That power without conscience isn't civilization. It's just organized cruelty with better clothes. Sir Edmund sighed. How disappointing. He nodded. A guard drove a blade through Thomas Crow's back, out through his chest, lifted him off his feet for a moment before dropping him to the floor like refuse. Crow's mouth opened. Blood bubbled out. His eyes found Nathaniel's one last time. Worth it. He mouthed the words, then died. Nathaniel roared. Animal sound, pure rage. Tried to stand. Couldn't. The wound had taken too much blood, too much strength. He could only watch as guards surrounded Brother Elias. As the old monk closed his eyes, whispered something that might have been prayer or curse or simple acknowledgement, as steel flashed in warehouse light, as 73 years of life ended in seconds, the monk fell without sound, just collapsed like something with strings cut, old body folding in on itself. Vivian's scream echoed off stone walls, raw, broken, the sound of something fundamental being destroyed. Sir Edmund stepped over bodies like they were furniture, crouched beside Nathaniel, studied his face with clinical interest. "Do you understand yet?" His voice was gentle, almost kind. "Do you grasp what you've been fighting? Not corruption, not individual evil, but the fundamental nature of power itself. The strong rule, the weak serve. That's the law written deeper than any constitution." Nathaniel met his eyes, said nothing, because words were useless, because Sir Edmund was right about the system, about how power worked, but he was wrong about what mattered, because lying on a warehouse floor bleeding out beside the bodies of men who'd died for something beyond themselves, Nathaniel understood with perfect clarity that Sir Edmund would never comprehend. Victory wasn't the point. Survival wasn't the goal. Legacy didn't matter. What mattered was the choice. The moment when you decided whether to bow to power or stand against it, whether to accept comfortable slavery or uncomfortable freedom. And in that choice, win or lose, live or die, you defined yourself. Sir Edmund stood, gestured to guards. "Take them, both of them. The demonstration needs witnesses." Hands grabbed Nathaniel, lifted him. The world spun. Blood loss making everything distant, unreal. He saw Vivian being restrained, saw her fighting, clawing at guards with bandaged hands, screaming his name. Saw Sir Edmund watching with the satisfied expression of a man who'd restored order to chaos. They were being dragged toward the door, toward whatever public execution or imprisonment Sir Edmund had planned, toward the end of resistance. And Nathaniel's vision was graying, consciousness slipping, the wound finally claiming what it had been owed since the safe house. His last thought before darkness took him was simple. At least he'd tried. At least he'd stood. At least Vivian would know someone had valued her enough to burn the world down rather than let them keep her. But his unconsciousness closed over him like water over a drowning man. He didn't see the figure watching from the warehouse rafters. Didn't see the messenger who'd slipped through guards while everyone focused on the drama below. Didn't see the young woman with ink-stained fingers and revolutionary fire in her eyes taking notes on everything she'd witnessed, recording names, crimes, the execution of an old monk and a reformed traitor. She was a printer's daughter, one of dozens scattered through London's underground press network, and what she'd just seen would be on broadsheets by noon, distributed through streets Sir Edmund thought he controlled, spreading truth faster than soldiers could suppress it. The demonstration Sir Edmund planned would backfire, because you can kill the messenger, can execute the Duke, can burn every document, but you can't murder an idea once it spreads. Can't suppress truth once enough people decide it matters more than safety. The structure was cracking, and Sir Edmund didn't even know it yet. Nathaniel woke to the smell of parchment and ink. Not dungeon stone, not blood, not the rot of imprisonment, just paper. The particular scent of words being committed to permanence. His eyes opened slowly, vision swimming, focusing on a ceiling he didn't recognize, wood beams, plaster, cracks spreading like rivers across white surface. Pain came next. His shoulder throbbed with every heartbeat. Deep ache that spoke of damage beyond simple cutting. The kind of wound that changed how a body moved forever. He tried to sit up, failed, managed only to turn his head. Vivian sat in a chair beside the bed, face pale, eyes ringed with exhaustion, but alive, whole. Watching him with expression he couldn't read. How long? His voice came out ruined, barely recognizable. 3 days. She leaned forward, touched his hand. "You nearly died." The wound festered. "We thought—" Her voice broke. She looked away. Nathaniel's mind struggled to assemble pieces. The warehouse, Sir Edmund, guards dragging them away, Brother Elias falling, Thomas Crow bleeding out. Then nothing. Just darkness and fever dreams. "Where are we?" He forced the words through dry throat. "Safe. For now." Vivian stood, moved to a window, pulled back curtain slightly, peered out. "Everything's changed. The whole city." You don't know yet. Can't know. You were unconscious for all of it. Changed how? She turned back, face catching light from window. And Nathaniel saw something there he'd never seen before. Not fear, not desperation. Something harder, sharper. Like she'd been forged in fire while he lay dying. The broadsheets. She said it simply. Someone witnessed what happened at the warehouse. The execution of Brother Elias. Thomas Crow's death. All of it. They wrote it down. Printed it. Distributed it through the underground press network before Sir Edmund could stop them. Nathaniel's chest tightened. One witness. One printer. Against the entire machinery of power. By the time guards started confiscating copies, Vivian continued, thousands of people had already read it. Workers, merchants, even some lesser nobles. The story spread faster than suppression. And people started asking questions about Richard Ashcroft, about the safe house assault, about why the crown was so desperate to silence a disgraced duke and an old monk. Her smile was thin, bitter. Sir Edmund tried to control the narrative, called it sedition, arrested printers. But you can't arrest an idea once it catches. Nathaniel closed his eyes, tried to process, tried to understand how witnessing his failure had somehow sparked something he couldn't achieve through direct action. There were protests. Vivian's voice grew stronger. In Southwark first, then spreading, workers refusing to load ships, merchants closing shops. Nothing violent, just people standing still, refusing to move until someone answered for Brother Elias. For Thomas Crow. For everyone the system had ground down. The Crown's response was exactly what you'd expect. She moved back to the chair. Sat. Arrests, threats, promises of force. But they couldn't arrest everyone. Couldn't threaten thousands of people who'd stopped being afraid. Her hands twisted in her lap. The particular nervous gesture of someone carrying weight beyond what they'd been built for. Parliament met in emergency session 4 days ago. Nobles who'd spent careers enabling Sir Edmund suddenly distanced themselves. Called for investigations. Demanded accountability. Not because they grew conscience, because they saw which way the wind was blowing. Nathaniel opened his eyes, met hers, and Sir Edmund, gone. She said it flatly. Resigned the day before yesterday, cited health concerns. But everyone knows. He lost control of the narrative, lost the ability to suppress truth through simple authority. Lost. For now. Her voice was careful, measured. The structure still stands. The same nobles still hold power. But something fundamental shifted. The myth of invulnerability cracked, and once people see that power can bleed, it changes everything. Nathaniel tried to sit up again, this time managed with Vivian's help. Pain screamed through his shoulder, but he pushed through, needed to see, to understand. She helped him to the window, supported his weight, let him lean against the frame. Outside, London sprawled vast and dirty beneath gray sky, but different somehow. The streets carried energy he recognized from long ago, before power had taught him to see people as resources to be managed. This was the city that had raised him, that had shown him how survival worked when you started with nothing. Before titles, before calculation, before he'd learned to measure worth by what could be exploited. They're calling you a martyr. Vivian's voice was quiet, close to his ear. The Duke who sacrificed everything to expose corruption, who led common people against the crown itself. I didn't sacrifice anything. Nathaniel's laugh was rough. I just refused to let them have you. Everything else was just stubbornness. That's not what they see. She gestured to the streets, to the city stirring with something like hope. They see someone from the aristocracy who chose their side, who proved that conscience matters more than position. They're wrong. I'm no hero. 20 years of enabling the same corruption. 20 years of choosing power over principle. A few days of desperate action doesn't erase that. Maybe not. Her hand found his. But it's a start. They stood together in silence, watching London wake to something neither could quite name. Not revolution. The system hadn't fallen. But not submission either. The quiet acceptance that had allowed men like Sir Edmund to rule unopposed had cracked. What happens now? Nathaniel finally asked. Vivian was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried weight earned through suffering. We disappear, both of us. Richard is dead, hanged 3 days ago for his crimes. My marriage dissolved with his execution. I'm free, legally, technically, but that freedom comes with a price, which is, we can never return to the lives we had. You're still officially wanted for treason. Half the nobles want you dead. The other half want you as a symbol. Either way, the moment you surface publicly, you become a target. And you? Her smile was sad. I'm the scandalous widow of a murderer, the woman who drove a duke to abandon his duty. Society will never accept me, never forgive what I represent. So we run. No. She turned to face him fully. We build something new, far from London, far from courts and politics and the machinery of power. Brother Elias owned land in the north, near Blackwood Forest, the Abbey and surrounding grounds. He left it to me in a will written years ago. The Abbey. Nathaniel's voice was soft, where it all started, where it all ended. She corrected, and where it might begin again. Different, quieter, but real. She pulled him back toward the bed, helped him sit, knelt in front of him so their eyes were level. I won't lie and say it will be easy. The land is poor. The Abbey needs years of repair. We'll have nothing but what we can build with our own hands. No servants, no comfort, no protection except what we make ourselves. Sounds perfect. Nathaniel meant it. After 20 years swimming in poison, the idea of simple poverty held appeal he couldn't quite articulate. Vivian searched his face. Really looked. Like she was trying to read truth beneath whatever masks he'd learned to wear. Who are you now? She asked quietly. Not who you were, not who they think you are, but who you actually are after everything. Nathaniel considered, drew breath, felt pain and life and possibility mixing in his chest. I don't know. He said it honestly. I spent so long being what power required, being the duke, the operator, the man who measured every action by advantage. I don't know who exists underneath that. Then we'll find out together. Her hands found his face. We'll go north, restore the Abbey, maybe help people who need it, maybe just survive. But we'll do it as ourselves, not as roles we're performing for audience that doesn't care. And if they come for us, if Sir Edmund's allies, if the crown decides we're too dangerous to leave alive, then we face it. She said it simply, but at least we'll have lived honestly first. At least we'll have tried to be something other than what we were made. Nathaniel pulled her close, ignored screaming shoulder, just held her. This woman who'd tried to die in a bathtub because living in a cage had become unbearable. Who'd survived anyway. Who'd found strength enough to imagine building something new from ruins. I love you. He said it against her hair. Not because you're beautiful, not because wanting you nearly destroyed me, but because you refuse to stay broken, because you look at rubble and see foundation. She pulled back, eyes wet but steady. I love you because you finally stopped calculating, stopped trying to control everything, started just being human. They stayed like that, foreheads touching, breathing together, two people who'd lost everything except each other. Over the next week, Nathaniel healed, slowly. The wound would scar badly, leave his shoulder weak for whatever years remained, but he could move, could function, could do the physical work survival would require. They made plans in whispers. Vivian had connections through Brother Elias's network, people who could arrange travel, provide supplies, help them vanish into the north before anyone thought to look. The city outside continued its strange awakening. Parliament passed reforms, nothing revolutionary, just small concessions, limits on noble immunity, investigations into corruption, breadcrumbs thrown to angry masses. But it was something, a crack that might widen, or might seal over with time and pressure. Nathaniel didn't care anymore. His fight was finished. Let others carry it forward. Let the printer's daughter, who'd witnessed everything, become the voice he'd never managed to be. He'd done what mattered, saved Vivian, proved that resistance was possible, shown people that power could bleed. The rest was just details. On the 8th day, they left London before dawn. Simple clothes. No servants, no guards, just two people on horses heading north toward Blackwood Forest, toward the Abbey where 7 years of secret meetings had slowly built something worth destroying everything for. The journey took 3 weeks. They moved slowly, avoiding main roads, staying in small villages where no one knew or cared about London politics. where a man and woman traveling together raised no questions beyond polite curiosity. Nathaniel felt his body changing, muscle built from riding, calluses from handling reins, the particular hardening that came from physical labor after years of soft living. He felt his mind changing too, the constant calculation engine slowing, stopping, replaced by something simpler, observation without agenda, thought without scheme. He'd spent 20 years treating life as chess, every move measured, every person evaluated by usefulness, every moment judged by advantage. Now he just existed, rode through countryside, talked with Vivian about nothing and everything, let hours pass without counting cost. It felt like drowning in reverse, like surfacing after decades underwater. Painful, disorienting, but necessary. Blackwood Forest appeared on the horizon in early spring, trees budding with new growth, the particular green of life returning after winter. They rode through familiar paths, past landmarks Nathaniel remembered from countless midnight journeys, the twisted oak, the stone marker, the stream crossing, and finally, the Abbey. It looked smaller than memory, more ruined, walls crumbling, roof collapsed in sections, nature reclaiming what humans had abandoned. But the bones remained, the structure, the possibility. They dismounted, stood together in the courtyard where guards had once surrounded them, where Brother Elias had revealed his lifetime of collected evidence, where everything had started falling apart in ways that might let it be rebuilt as something honest. "This is home now," Vivian said it quietly. "If we can make it one." Nathaniel looked at the ruin, at work that would take years, at the sheer impossibility of two people restoring what time and weather had destroyed. Then he looked at Vivian, at the woman who'd survived attempts to break her, who stood in wreckage and saw foundation. "We can." He said it with certainty he'd lost somewhere in 20 years of political maneuvering. "We will." They started that day, clearing rubble, sorting stone that could be salvaged from stone too damaged to use. The work was brutal, left them exhausted and aching, but honest in ways Nathaniel had forgotten work could be. No scheming, no calculation, just physical effort toward visible progress. Over weeks that became months, the Abbey began to transform, not restored to former glory. That would have required resources they'd never have, but made livable, made functional, made into something that served purpose. They worked in silence mostly, speaking only when necessary, learning to communicate through gesture and presence, building language that required no performance. Other people arrived, slowly, carefully. Word had spread through Brother Elias's network about the Abbey, about the Duke and Lady who'd vanished north, about sanctuary being built in Blackwood Forest. First came a widow whose husband had been executed for debts he couldn't pay. Then a young man fleeing arrest for sedition. A family whose home had been seized by nobles claiming ancient rights. People the system had chewed up and discarded. People with nowhere else to go. Nathaniel and Vivian, he took them in. Not from charity, not from obligation, but from recognition. These were the people power had taught them not to see. Resources, tools, numbers in ledgers. Now Nathaniel saw them as they were. Human, desperate, worthy of basic dignity. The Abbey became a refuge, not organized, not systematic, just a place where people could exist without performing roles, where a former duke and scandalous widow worked alongside laborers and criminals rebuilding something honest from ruins. One evening in late summer, Nathaniel stood on the Abbey's reconstructed wall, watching sunset paint the forest gold and red. His shoulder ached with the particular pain that meant rain coming. His hands were calloused, his face weathered. The aristocrat he'd been was barely recognizable. Vivian joined him, leaned against stone still warm from day's heat. Her hair had grown long, unbound. Her face showed lines that hadn't been there 6 months prior. She looked older, harder, more real. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "Everything you lost. Everything we gave up." Nathaniel considered, measured truth carefully, not from calculation but from respect for the question's weight. "I regret the people who died. Brother Elias, Thomas Crow, Sullivan and his men at the safe house. They paid prices I can't repay. That's not what I asked." "I know." He turned to face her. "No, I don't regret it. I regret spending 20 years becoming someone I despised. I regret enabling corruption because fighting it seemed inconvenient. I regret every compromise that made me comfortable while others suffered. But choosing you, choosing truth, losing everything to finally be something real, that I'll never regret. She was quiet for a long moment. Below them, people moved through the courtyard, preparing evening meal, talking, laughing, building community from shared damage. I used to think power mattered, Vivian said quietly. That position determined worth, that being the advisor's wife made me valuable. But it was all performance, all masks. I was never actually seen, never actually known. And now I'm seen. By you, by the people here, as myself. Flawed, damaged, but real. She smiled. It's terrifying. But better than being worshipped as something I never was. Nathaniel pulled her close, felt her warmth, her solidity, the proof that some things survived even total destruction. We built this. He gestured to the Abbey. The people. The beginning of something like community. From nothing. From less than nothing. From complete ruin. We did. She agreed. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the only way to build something honest is to first burn away everything false. Even if it costs everything. They stood together watching darkness claim the forest. Watching stars emerge. Watching the particular peace that comes when you finally stopped running from who you are. Months became years. The Abbey grew. Not grand, not impressive, but functional. A working refuge for people society had discarded. Nathaniel learned skills he'd never needed as Duke. Carpentry, farming, the basic survival work that nobility delegated. He wasn't good at it. His hands remembered signing documents better than swinging hammers. But he learned. More importantly, he learned to accept imperfection. To build things that worked rather than things that impressed. To measure success by whether people had shelter rather than whether reputation increased. Vivienne became something like the Abbey's heart. Not through authority, but through presence. She listened to people's stories, helped settle disputes, provided quiet counsel when asked. Never demanding, never controlling, just being available. Together they created space where people could heal, could rebuild, could learn to trust again after being betrayed by systems that promised protection while delivering exploitation. News from London arrived sporadically. Sir Edmund had died. Some said natural causes. Others whispered poison. Either way, the man who'd built empires from shadow was gone. The reforms Parliament passed mostly failed. Nobles found ways around restrictions. Corruption adapted. The structure remained largely intact. But something had changed. The broadsheets continued. Underground printing presses multiplied. People asked questions they'd once been too afraid to voice. The myth of aristocratic invulnerability never fully recovered. Nathaniel took no satisfaction from it, felt no vindication, just quiet acknowledgement that resistance mattered even when it didn't immediately win. Sometimes at night he dreamed of the warehouse, of Brother Elias falling, of Thomas Crow bleeding out, of Sullivan and his men dying so two strangers could have minutes. He woke from those dreams with Vivian holding him, whispering that he couldn't save everyone. That guilt was just another form of ego, that living honestly was the only repayment the dead would accept. He tried to believe her. Some nights he managed. 5 years after fleeing London, on a winter evening when snow covered Blackwood Forest in silence, a visitor arrived at the Abbey. The printer's daughter, now a woman in her 20s, face showing scars from arrests and beatings, but eyes still burning with fire that no amount of suppression could extinguish. She carried a satchel full of broadsheets, hundreds of them, all documenting the slow change spreading through England, the questions asked, the resistance building, the cracks widening. You started this, she told Nathaniel. Sitting in the Abbey's main hall, voice carrying conviction that made him uncomfortable. When you chose truth over power, when you showed people that nobles could bleed, you gave us permission to imagine differently. I didn't start anything. Nathaniel's voice was rough. I just refused to accept what I was told was inevitable. That's the same thing, she smiled. Fierce, certain. Every revolution begins with one person saying no. You said it loud enough that others heard. Now we're saying it too. Be careful, Nathaniel warned. They'll kill you if they can. They'll destroy everything you've built. I know. She didn't flinch. Brother Elias knew too. Thomas Crow knew. They did it anyway, because some things matter more than survival. She left the next morning, riding back toward London, toward danger and purpose and the particular recklessness of people who'd stopped measuring cost. Nathaniel watched her go with mixed feelings. Pride, fear, guilt that others carried weight he'd set down. Vivian found him on the wall, same place they'd stood countless times watching the forest. She didn't ask what he was thinking, just stood beside him, present, solid, real. You can't save everyone. She said it gently. You can only build something worth preserving and trust others to do the same. I know. He pulled her close. But knowing doesn't make it easier. Nothing worth doing is easy. Her voice was soft. That's how you know it matters. They returned to work, to the endless maintenance the Abbey required, to the people who needed shelter, to the simple act of existing honestly in a world that rewarded performance. Years passed. Nathaniel's hair went fully silver, his shoulder never properly healed. He moved with the particular stiffness of men who'd pushed their bodies past breaking. But he was alive, present, known. Vivian aged beside him, face showing lines, body showing wear, but also showing peace that had been absent in all those years of performing noble wife. She'd found something in the Abbey, purpose, identity, self. They never married. The concept seemed irrelevant. What did official recognition matter when you'd already chosen each other despite every force arrayed against it? They simply existed together, built together, loved together. On a spring morning in their 10th year at the Abbey, Nathaniel stood in the garden they'd planted, watched vegetables growing, smelled earth and growth, felt sun on skin weathered by outdoor work. He thought about the man he'd been. Duke Ravenshire, political operator, master manipulator, the version of himself that had measured every action by advantage, that had treated people as resources, that had enabled corruption because fighting it seemed inconvenient. That man was dead, had died in a Southwark warehouse beside Brother Elias and Thomas Crow. What remained was something smaller, less impressive, but infinitely more real. He didn't rule anyone, didn't control anything beyond the work his own hands could accomplish, possessed no power except what others freely gave by choosing to stay. And standing in dirt with calloused hands and an aching shoulder, Nathaniel Ravenshire understood that this was freedom. Not the version aristocrats claimed, not power without consequence, but the freedom to be exactly who you were without performance, without masks, without calculation, the freedom to fail, to struggle, to build something imperfect and honest, the freedom to look at another person and see them rather than what they could provide, the freedom to choose love over advantage, truth over comfort, struggle over security. That was worth every title he'd lost, every compromise he'd abandoned, every certainty he'd destroyed. Vivian emerged from the Abbey, moved toward him through the garden. Her dress was simple, worn, patched in places. But her eyes held light he'd first seen 7 years ago in another garden at a party built on lies and performance. She reached him, took his hand, stood beside him in silence, watching things grow. This is enough. She said it quietly. Simple statement of fact, not happiness, not contentment, just acknowledgement that they'd found something worth protecting. Yes? Nathaniel agreed. It is. Because after spending decades chasing power only to discover it was just another cage, he'd finally found something that didn't require performance, didn't demand compromise, didn't measure worth by what could be extracted. He'd found a woman who refused to stay broken, a community built from shared damage, a purpose that required only showing up and being present. And in that finding, he'd discovered the truth that should have been obvious all along. That strength wasn't control, that power wasn't domination, that winning didn't require anyone else to lose. Real strength was choosing to stand when falling was easier, was refusing to let suffering make you cruel, was building something honest even when lies were more profitable. Real power was looking at rubble and seeing foundation, was extending hand to people society discarded, was creating space where others could heal. Real victory was just surviving with conscience intact, with capacity for love undiminished, with willingness to keep trying despite knowing how badly things could fail. The Abbey bells rang. Time for evening meal, Time for community to gather. Time for people to share food and stories and the simple act of existing together. Nathaniel and Vivienne walked hand in hand toward the sound, toward the people waiting, toward the life they'd built from complete destruction. And as sunset painted Blackwood Forest in shades of gold and shadow, as the ancient Abbey walls held warmth from day's sun, as voices raised in laughter and argument and simple human connection, Nathaniel understood that this was the ending he'd never known to hope for. Not triumph, not vindication, not power reclaimed or enemies destroyed, just life. Honest, imperfect, real, shared with someone who'd seen him at his worst and chosen to stay anyway. Built in a place that remembered their sins but offered possibility of something better. The story that had begun with forbidden passion in a forgotten monastery, that had crashed through scandal and betrayal and violence, that had cost lives and titles and everything comfortable. That story ended here, in dirt and calloused hands and simple peace, in a man who'd learned too late that everything he'd chased was worthless compared to the one thing he'd almost destroyed trying to protect it. And standing in the Abbey's courtyard, surrounded by people who'd found refuge in ruins, Nathaniel Ravenshire felt something he hadn't experienced in decades. Not happiness. That was too simple. Not peace. That was too absolute. Just quiet acceptance that he'd finally become someone worth being, that he'd chosen correctly when it mattered most, that love and truth and stubborn resistance had been worth every price paid. The powerful still ruled. The corrupt still prospered. The system still ground people down. But here, in this small corner of the world, in this rebuilt Abbey in Blackwood Forest, in this community of damaged souls learning to trust again, something different existed. Proof that another way was possible. That choosing humanity over advantage could actually work. That two people willing to sacrifice everything could build something worth more than all the titles and gold in England. And that was enough. More than enough. That was everything.